favorite phrase? Wait, what? Do you know why I say it?
Your favorite phrase is, what do you mean by that?
Or wait, what?
No, as if.
Hi, and welcome back to the Natalie Noyes podcast. Last time on History for All to Understand, Greg and I gave an overview about why history is important, starting from prehistoric history and going through modern history. On tonight's episode, we will be digging into ancient history, looking at this time when the foundations of our modern world were being established.
And we can look at it chronologically if you want. We can look at it regionally on a map. We can talk about different topics like war or inventions. So let's get into it. Where do you want to start?
So first, walk me through what years are we looking at?
Well, I was going to quiz you, young lady, since we walked over that last time. What is ancient history? Do you know when that is?
Yes, I'm looking at your timeline and it says 3000 BC to 476 AC.
3000 BC is not an exact number, but that's about when we start recording ancient history. When I say we, I'm talking about people, and why is that even the date? Well, that's when people started writing things down. If you don't write things down, then no one knows about your culture. That's why we know about some of the people we're going to be talking about today. And then that end date, 476, is a specific year when the Roman Empire fell.
So the famous Roman Empire is at the end point of the ancient age?
Yeah, and we can talk a little bit about that if we get to that today, but that might almost be something worth talking about all by itself. There's plenty to talk about with the Roman. Of all civilizations, that's the one civilization that you could probably most credit modern culture, giving us things like representative democracy and rule of law and things like that. The Romans have given us so much, so we can talk about that a little later if you want. So I wanted to show you a map. You can show the people as well. But what do you notice about the map? Besides my little stars and numbers, because that's where I wanted to take you through. What do you notice? Anything?
The majority of your dots are over on that side, the right side.
That's really good. I didn't think of that, but that's good. So remember last time we talked about civilizations are going to start where there's plenty of food and water and resources, right? So all those dots, that is true. They're all in a place where there's plenty of rivers and access to food and things like that, right? And yeah, a lot of them are in the same region. There's one over here, number 6, in Mesoamerica. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But how about we start with number 1? Do you know where that is?
No.
I mean, you know the continent at least? The big continent on the map is Asia.
Asia.
This is all Asia, right? So that's, some people call it Asia Minor, but that would be Mesopotamia.
What is that? Like, what specifically, what countries are that? What's that?
Today?
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia,
Thank you.
Iran, Iraq,
Okay.
over here, Afghanistan. So Mesopotamia, Meso means middle. This is middle land. And it's a catch-all. It's a region that has a lot of different cultures, right? We talked about the Bible last time and the different cultures that popped up in the Bible that conquered the Hebrews, actually, like the Babylonians, like the Assyrians, right? The Neo-Babylonians and the Neo-Assyrians, all these people lived there. The Medes, the Persians. So this is near the cradle of civilization. This is where we first start having people write things down. And as we go, all these numbers, they kind of do overlap. It's hard to say which civilization was first, but probably right here in Mesopotamia.
What biblical time period was that?
One book that comes to mind is the book of Daniel, right? When the Israelites or the Hebrews were taken into captivity. That was by the Babylonians, right about where number 1 is. So right over there along the coast, that's where Israel is. So they were taken hundreds of miles inland into captivity. So that'd be one example. And then everything in the New Testament is when the Romans have controlled the region now. So star number 7, they controlled that region as well. Number 3, the Greeks, they also took over that entire area at some point as well, with Alexander the Great, like around maybe 400s BC, something like that, 300s BC. So number 2, do you know where that is? Continent?
Looks like Morocco.
Well, Morocco is up here, but the whole continent's Africa, right? So this is North Africa. So do you know, there's the Nile River. What would that be?
I have no idea.
The Egyptians.
No idea.
right?
Where's Egypt?
So you haven't been in the 6th grade for a long time, so
I don't know.
I'm going to give you a pass.
Any of this.
Right? So that's where the modern nation of Egypt is today as well. But ancient Egypt, it's a really important one to talk about.
Can we talk about this map and how I have no tips at all? Like, how am I supposed to
I
know?
did that on purpose, right? There's no lines. Yeah. It's just a geographic map. Notice there's a big river there. So you're going to have an easier time feeding a growing population if you can water your crops and feed your animals and eat your animals and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and obviously there's more than 7, right? As we talk about ancient cultures, there's more than 7, but here are 7 that I've picked that I think are important because they've passed down things to the modern world. So the Egyptians, connecting it to the Bible stories, is when Moses takes the people out of Egypt. Actually, 400 years before that is when Joseph brought his family into Egypt, but that all happens in the time of ancient Egypt.
Okay.
So that's number 2. There's a list of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and there's only one that's still standing, and that is the Egyptians. Pyramids, right? Those great pyramids, the last one standing. In Babylon, there was the Hanging Towers of Babylon. There was some Greek statues, the Temple of Zeus, things like that. But the only one left is the pyramids. You can go see it today. It's pretty cool that they were built thousands of years ago and they still stand today.
Do you have another map, really? Do you have another one where I can see the region, like present day?
There's a modern map of Egypt. So there's like the capital, Cairo, and the pyramids are just outside of that. Among many other things that you may have heard about the Egyptians, among other things that you may have heard of with the Egyptians, the hieroglyphics that they used to write, inside the pyramids, the fact that the pyramids were tombs for some of the rulers. You probably heard of some of the rulers, like King Tut was a famous one because they found his tomb, King Tutankhamun. I'm sure there's a better way to pronounce it.
When did they find it?
Like 100 years ago, like early 1900s, something like that. Maybe a little later. But anyway, one thing that I recently learned, because I was talking to our daughter about it, was like, who decided on 24-hour days? It just seems like an arbitrary number. Why not 25? Why not 10? Right? Who decided, like, in a day, let's split it up into smaller segments of time? Like, you would think 10, like, just seems like a clean way to do it. But it was the Egyptians, right? They had 12 segments of time at night, and then so they matched it with 12 segments of time in the daytime. So our 24 hours comes from the Egyptians. And going back to number 1 on our map, Mesopotamia, I believe they're the ones that came up with the 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute. We got it from the Mesopotamians. So a lot of these ancient cultures, we just take it for granted that this is how we tell time and count time and things like that. It came from them. Even a lot of the days of the week, right, are named after different gods and things like that. All right. Let's head back to our map. Number 3, we could talk about that for a long time, but I'll just skim over it. So these are the Greeks. Right, we've talked in other conversations about the Greek contributions to philosophy. But in addition to philosophy, we have the Greeks to thank for democracy. Right? That's a Greek word. Demos means people, kratos means rule. It's the rule of the people. And that was passed down to the Romans and then to the rest of Europe and the United States and so on. This idea of a representative democracy where we vote for our rulers, for our leaders, or we vote directly on laws comes from the Greeks. You can stop me at any time, but I'll just take you through each of these. So with the Greeks, I can't help but think of the New Testament because the Apostle Paul went all throughout the Roman Empire, but Greek was still the culture. It was, in fact, that was the language, right? Those disciples of Jesus spoke Hebrew or Aramaic, which was like the vernacular of Hebrew. They also spoke Greek because Greek was the language of commerce. So they all spoke Greek. In fact, the Gospels were written in Greek. And even the Gospel of Luke, that was Peter's Gospel. And it's believed that Peter wasn't as confident with his Greek, so he had Luke transcribe it for him. So everything was written in Greek. And then Paul's letters, right, are letters like 1 Corinthians, Ephesians. Those are letters to Greek cities, or believers in Greek cities. Ephesians is written to the people of Ephesus. Corinthians is the people of Corinth, right? Those are Greek cities. Yeah, a lot of this connects with the Bible, honestly. One that doesn't, if you go to number 4. So China, when we get to talking about the Middle Ages, China will come up again. But China is an old, ancient civilization, unique in that it has this dynastic tradition. Dynastic, same word as dynasty, right? They have dynasties, and they wrote it down all the way back to 3000 BC or so. The Chinese wrote things down. So that's how we know all about it. You could trace back all the names of the dynasties all the way up until the last dynasty, which was right before, sometime in the 1900s, China had a revolution. But the thing is, they didn't really connect with other of these civilizations that we're talking about, not until Marco Polo in like the 1200s.
So none of these connected with each other at all?
No, because think about it, how are you going to get there? There's no airplanes, there's no trains.
So with your Paul example in the Bible where he like wrote to different churches, that was like just unique to that region, not crossing over further.
Yeah, but now that you say that, it makes me think there were, I think, 2 of the disciples that became apostles, right? So disciples of Christ, they were students of Christ that became apostles. So they were sent out, right, to spread the gospel. 2 of them did go that far. I think one went all the way to Indonesia, which would be down here on the map. It's not just possible, but pretty certain that people did travel there, but it wasn't well known. It wasn't, there was, there was like the Silk Road. You've heard of the Silk Road. That was like Marco Polo went on the Silk Road. That was well into the Middle Ages. So in ancient times, it wasn't common to go to China and to even know anything about China, honestly. Part of the reason why, if you look at the map, China is isolated. It's hard to get there. It's hard to get there from the west because it's across land, a lot of desert. It's not like a walk in the park, right? It's like no one would risk their lives just to go see what's over there. No one really came from the west. Definitely no one's coming from the east because it's surrounded by ocean, right? There's other, like the islands of Japan are here, but no one else is coming into China. And no one's coming from the north because there's a big desert, the Gobi Desert's right here. The Mongolians do later, but that's, again, the Middle Ages, about the same time actually as Marco Polo, the 1200s. No one's coming from the south because there's the world's largest mountain range right here, right? The Himalayas. So no one's even coming from India. It's not a walk in the park. China was isolated from every side. So they were uniquely a culture that developed almost without much interference, right? All the other ones we've talked about, they crossed paths. They warred with each other, right? 1, 3, and 7, for example. So Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, they all controlled a lot of the same regions. Here's a map we found online. Notice it's a lot of this. Hold on.
He's okay. Moving on. Yeah, let's go figure it out.
You want me to stop that?
Yeah, I'll stop.
Just do a part 2.
No, check this out.
No, check
Our kid
this
got
out.
hit in the eyeball. Let's talk about that.
Are Nerf guns safe for kids? Let me answer that question with another question. Does a one-legged duck swim in a circle?
Does Natalie throw Nerf guns away in the trash can?
Does Dad pretend to throw them in the trash dumpster, but not? Okay.
Fun. Ancient history. Okay. We have got lots of stars, 7 stars. We're on number...
So we skipped number 5, let's go to number 5. So India, back on this map here, that's one of the earliest civilizations. Now, why do you think this area of the world was so prosperous, so fertile? It still is today. There's like over 1 billion people that live in India. How are that many people able to live there and have enough food? Is it a desert? No. Is it frozen over? Of course not.
Is it tropical?
It's, yes, at least subtropical. But there's this giant mountain range that we talked about between India and China, the Himalayas. And whenever storm systems come through there, they usually dump all their water on the India side of the Himalayas. And so there's always water flowing down in those rivers, down into the valley. So India always has plenty of water, always can grow a lot of crops and feed a growing population. So that's why they've been so successful and prosperous over the years. And of course, from India comes a lot of the major world religions. Buddha was from India, right? So Siddhartha Gautama. And Hinduism is still, I think that's the number 1 religion in India. Sikhism. And then, the reason that today why India is split from Pakistan is over religious reasons too. Pakistan is a largely Muslim country. We'll get to that in the Middle Ages. Back to our map, number 6. our area of the world. So this is the only one in the Americas. Were there people that lived in the Americas besides this one area that we're talking about? Probably, right? You may have heard that a lot of people came over on a land bridge, right, across the Bering Strait, and that's how people came to the Americas, right? But again, if they didn't write anything down, we don't know much about them. But one of the earliest, actually it's probably the earliest that we know about is right here in Mesoamerica. And that is the Maya, or even before the Maya, the Olmec and the Toltec, right? Your people.
My people.
Your people. So if
The-
you are,
the
if you're
Native
Mexican,
Indians, yes.
if you're Mexican,
Like me.
like you, then you
Same.
have some amount of native in you, some amount of Spanish, depending on your ancestry, or it could be all one or all the other, but usually it's some sort of a mix, right? But if you're native, it's likely that it came from these people, right? The Maya, or predating the Maya, the Olmec, the Toltec, or the Aztecs, which came later, right? But that's actually in the Middle Ages. So the oldest ones are right there in Mesoamerica. How do we know about them? Because they carved some things in the rocks, and some of those temples still stand in the jungles. But that is an actual rainforest, right? All across like the southern part of Mexico and the Yucatan Peninsula. So if you don't take care of things, the jungle literally grows over the top of some of these old cities. So even recently, people have discovered like, oh my gosh, there's a giant pyramid here. It was like completely swallowed up by the jungle. So that brings us to the last one, number 7. That's Rome, right? We can talk all about Rome later, but just the highlights now is that this was the successor of the Greeks. They took on Greek culture. They have really the same gods, right? The Roman gods and the Greek gods are the same gods, different names. Like Mars is the god of war for the Greeks. Jupiter is the god of war for the Romans, same god, stuff like that. Right? Hermes is the messenger god for the Greeks, and Pluto is the messenger god for the Romans. Just one example. They have the same religion. They take the same philosophical traditions, the same democratic traditions. So culturally, a very, very similar people group. And then they famously thrived and controlled the whole Mediterranean. Like if you look at the other map, it's a big area that they controlled for almost 1,000 years, right? All this in North Africa, all the way up to what is now England, all the way over to Spain, all the way over to Greece, down to the Middle East for almost 1,000 years. So we talked last podcast about the running joke that guys think about the Roman Empire too often.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why it's like this was the largest, most successful empire of the ancient world. Why were they so successful?
Interesting.
So this map shows a lot of the places we were just talking about.
Okay. Why these 7 again?
So
Like how many outsider ones are we not talking about?
those 7 are, again, the ones that wrote things down, so we know a lot about them. So that's 1, that they wrote it down. 2, they were successful, right? They thrived, they lasted a long time, they conquered other people around them, potentially. You don't usually hear history from conquered people, right?
We talked a little bit about this.
Yeah, I was trying to think of an analogy. It's almost like you have just like people that live in their houses on a street, but one person's famous. Like everybody wants to hear about their story, but no one really cares about the neighbor that maybe didn't do anything significant. People lived in ancient history everywhere, and people have stories. And I'm sure if we could be a fly on the wall anywhere else that's not on this map, just maybe up here, like in Alaska, like with the Inuits or something. I'm sure there's still amazing stories that people have, but we don't know because they never wrote it down, so we don't have their stories, or they were conquered, and so people and cultures disappear that way and always have.
You asked me that question last time.
Which question?
Like, why did people ask, like, why do we not hear from the perspective of the conquered communities?
Yeah.
Or,
Oh, did we? Yeah.
You kind of talked about that. What is your answer for that again?
I mean, I think a lot of times it's brought up as if it's a negative thing. Like there's a common saying that history is told by the victors or something like that, right? And I suppose that's true. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the victors are bad, right? Like a really, I guess, potentially controversial example would be this whole Columbus Day thing, right? There was the establishment of Columbus Day as a holiday many years ago, many decades ago, 100 years ago at least, in America. And it was celebrated every year to celebrate the man, Columbus, this Italian sailor who sailed on behalf of Spain. So it's celebrated especially by Italian Americans, Spanish Americans, right? Because he sailed for the Spanish crown, but he's culturally Italian. He takes this huge risk to come across the ocean, like a lot of the early sailors did. But he's one of the first ones to land in what is now the Caribbean, in the Bahamas. By all accounts, he wasn't a perfect man, but he was a devout Catholic. It wasn't his intention to come and genocide everybody. But that's how the story turned in recent years, right? Where there was a movement to get rid of Columbus and erase him from history. Yeah, at least 5 years ago. Yeah. Because he's a evil genocidal maniac that killed all the natives. A counterpoint that I thought was really interesting to that I've heard is that it's almost assumed that native people in the Americas were living in perfect peace and harmony, and there was this fantastic just collection of civilizations like living in a utopia or something, and these big evil mean advanced Christians from Europe came and ruined everything, right? And I don't think that's fair because for one, all of these ancient not ancient, but all these native cultures from the Americas were warring tribes that killed each other and took over each other. And like we were just talking about, a lot of them disappeared from history because they got wiped out. And no one knows and no one cares because they didn't know about them. But that's what was happening. The strong survive. That's how the Aztecs took over Mexico and everybody else. But the Spanish came. And yeah, I'm not saying they were all like perfect people. They did horrible things. I'm sure some people did. But they did also bring a monotheistic worldview. They brought Christianity. They brought law and order. They brought inventions. You can't just say it was all bad. I mean, one worldview says, yeah, that was the natives' land. And those white Europeans had no business crossing the ocean and claiming any of it. And then there's another perspective that says this is how the world has always worked. Even all these ancient groups we've talked about, the strong survive, people conquer other people. And I think an argument could be made that these pilgrims, imperfect as they were, many of them were Bible-believing Christians who had moral clarity, I suppose, and virtue than other civilizations that could have conquered. They didn't come intending to kill everyone and execute everyone or anything like that. Sometimes those things did happen as a natural consequence of disease, for example, or other conflict that arose later on. But that wasn't their worldview to do that. Their worldview was to establish or to expand Christendom, right? Christ's kingdom, which had been the case in Europe throughout the Middle Ages. Most of Europe was Christian. They were expanding this worldview.
Yeah. I don't know if it was like Jeremiah 11 or something I was reading last week where it talks about, I don't know, like judgment. Jeremiah 11. Covenant is broken. Yeah, I just read this week. It says, Jeremiah 11, this is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. Listen to the terms of this covenant. Tell the people of Judah and those who live in Jerusalem. Tell them that this is what the Lord God of Israel says. Cursed is the one who does not obey the terms of his covenant. The terms I commanded your ancestors when I brought them out of Egypt, out of the iron smelting furnace. I said, obey me and do everything I command you, and you will be my people and I will be your God. And so then he says, so he's like telling Jeremiah to like explain to these people what the situation is. But that's really interesting because I think when you think about people groups and if God is truly sovereign over everything, including elements around historical things. Certainly, it's not just like survival of the fittest, right? Like I think God has always had a plan for different people groups and different generations and different time frames, and we see it all throughout the Bible. So in that case, I think as Americans, to go back and be like an indigenous group, like it's interesting because they were the first, like they were settler, they lived here, but we don't know the story. Like we don't know if God is sovereign over all, it's going to work out the way it's supposed to. And if they are to expand, God's the ultimate judge, right? Like he has.
Yeah, but for you to even say maybe the Pilgrims were in the wrong, and we talked about this last time.
Yeah.
What is wrong? What is right and what is wrong, and how do you determine that? Because if you come from a purely morally relativistic lens, that is to say, there is no real right or wrong, and every culture can determine their own right or wrong, then really you can't say that what the Pilgrims did was wrong. Like we talked last time, there's a C.S. Lewis quote that C.S. Lewis was straight out of, after World War II, used Hitler as his example. He's like, you can't say, oh, all beliefs are equally valid, and everyone's opinion is equally important, and every culture is, has their right to determine their morals. He said you can't believe that and also say Hitler is bad. It's like if you say Hitler's bad, you're appealing to a moral standard outside of you and me and everyone else. You're saying that there is a real right and wrong. It's the same thing with the Pilgrims and the natives of America.
Well, what I mean to say, to clarify, I totally follow what you're saying, and I get that. But what I mean to say is, when you are, so I like to say that God is a judge of a people, is our judge truly, right? Because ultimately, you can be operating in like with the best intentions, but then there's still like evil there. So I think about like the wheats and the chaff. Like Jesus didn't separate like bad, even though like collectively, like there are people that are always acting in their own interests in different capacities. And so I think it's the challenge where people want to be sensitive is understandable, but at the same time, it's like you don't ultimately know the story unless you were there, right? Unless people wrote about it. And so there could have been people that worked maliciously when like the whole group was trying to do something productive and good, and there are people there like doing bad things, and vice versa on both sides. But ultimately, again, like, because the Bible says too that like the wicked like I don't know, I'm thinking like Psalms, like David would be like, Lord, why are the wicked prospering, right? We don't know who the wicked is always, right? But the point is like, that's what's so fascinating to me when I relate it to biblical times, because it's like, if God allows both evil and good to exist, but it always says like God knows the heart. So we don't actually know the narrative, but I think certainly the end result is God wins, right? Like the good people win. So I'm just saying there could be a bad actor in that maybe acted out bad, and maybe that was bad for for the situation that played out, but not in the entirety of, like, we can never know the entirety of the picture of how it. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, and I know we got stuck on the Pilgrims and the natives when we really started talking about ancient history, right? And the Pilgrims, we're talking like 1600s. This is even after the Middle Ages, but I think we'll go back then. It's an interesting. It's fine to go there, because that's almost when the old world meets the new world, right? All those things on the map, except for the one that's over in the Americas, all those things on the map are in the old world, right? The world that was known and interconnected later on between Europe, North Africa, and Asia, right? That was the old world. And then all of a sudden, the new world was discovered. These two giant continents, North and South America, and Columbus, of course, but then also the Pilgrims. Over 100 years after Columbus, that's when these worlds collide, right? These worlds collide, worldviews collide, and that's something we can get into in a future podcast, I suppose. But ancient meets. I guess it's ancient on the Americas side too, at least with some of them. But like I said, they didn't write as much down, so we don't know. How did
they all pass away?
I mean, the Aztecs were the dominant force when the Spanish arrived, right, in the 1500s, with Hernan Cortez, right? He's the one that led the expedition and eventually helped to take down the Aztecs. And then his cousin, Francisco Pizarro, did the same in South America with the Inca. Those were the two powerful civilizations at the time. The Mayans still existed, but they weren't a powerful group. They were, the Aztecs went and conquered other peoples and enslaved other peoples and took other people groups to come and sacrifice in their temples in what's now Mexico City, right, in Tenochtitlan. So yeah, that was happening. That was definitely happening. But what you asked what took them down was disease, weapons, right? They often say like guns, germs, and steel, right? Because the Spanish had way fewer people. And I don't know if it was all of their intentions to take down the Aztecs. Cortez maybe at some point, I guess, but that's what happened. And the Spanish influence has grown in Mexico ever since. Even all the way up to California, right? With the Spanish missions and stuff like that.
That's cool. I think that's cool and fun because it's like part of my heritage, like my.
Not only is it part of your heritage,
it's
but
amazing.
You often, when I said that, I saw you light up because every time you go to Santa Barbara, you're like, I feel like I've been here before. I feel like this is my place. These are my people, right? With the Spanish architecture and stuff.
First time I went to Santa Barbara, I was like, this is so familiar. Like the first time I went there, and I'm obsessed with Santa Barbara to this day. I love Santa Barbara so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, like just where we're from and like how we carry this DNA that can be traced back to these people groups, and then Spaniards obviously coming over and influencing, and then history buffs.
The Roman Empire?
Huh?
Yeah.
We're gonna do an entire episode on the Roman Empire for sure.
Then we'll hit the Middle Ages. Then we'll hit modern times, world wars, all that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah? All right.
So you have 7.
How you feeling about this? Look at our timeline. Last time we talked about all of history and where it was along on the timeline. Today we hit ancient times. How you feeling?
I want to talk about each of them more in depth.
You just want to know some facts, or what do you want to know?
Like if you could pull out the top 3 things and then explore that.
Okay.
That would be fun.
All right. This is an artist's rendition of the Hanging Towers of Babylon. Something that almost certainly did exist in the ancient world.
How do you draw a model of this?
Garden. Oh yeah, a lot of times in 6th grade, you pick one of the wonders of the ancient world. This is one of them. It no longer exists, but it's a pretty cool idea because you and I like to go to botanic gardens and things like that. This was like the ultimate botanic garden. Likely a lot of vines. I picture like bougainvillea. I don't even know if it's from that area, maybe, but stuff like that.
Didn't somebody build that for their wife?
I think so. So, the closest major city to where Babylon is today is Baghdad in Iraq. So, Babylon is in modern day Iraq. It's about 50 miles south of Baghdad. So, there's some of the ancient ruins right there. It's pretty wild. You would think that, like with Rome and Athens, these are still major cities today. It's interesting that what used to be Babylon, this really important city from ancient times, it's just ruins. The garden as well.
And this was a people group that was away from God. Very pagan.
That area was taken over by different groups too. Like the other big ones, the Assyrians. Not Syria, like as in Syria today, different word, the Assyrians. So here's an interesting one. We talked about China a little bit and how they had this history of dynasties. So check out this timeline. This shows many of the major dynasties that go back to the year 2000 BCE. And you can see some of them last for a long time, like right there, the Zhou dynasty. It goes for almost 300 years, right? But some of the dynasties are short-lived, like that one was only for the Wang Mang and Interregnum. Only goes for like 14 years, that little blip on there. But some of them last for hundreds of years until the very last one, the Qing dynasty, that lasted for almost 300 years also. And then boom, no more dynasties because China became a republic after that. And then decades after that became communist, and they're still communist today. One thing that I often wonder about is how were they able to make that last so long? Thousands of years, the same political system, different families taking over, and there was still war and stuff like that, but the same system. They never changed it up. They never really heard of or decided to try democracy and give people the right to vote. This is also a very pagan culture too. And new belief systems were introduced later on, like Confucianism. Confucianism is still very prevalent in China, right? This idea that you're supposed to be in right relationship with your ruler, with husband, wife, with your children, right? It's about respect. It's about community over self.
Could that be the reason why it dragged on for so long? Like the respect for the system, the culture, the deep ingrained culture in that? Because if you look at cultures based on their traditions, the stronger that is and the stronger the pull toward that, it might last longer.
Yeah, there's very much a merit system as well.
So I was actually quite fascinated with China when we were in the car one time and you were talking about how isolated they are and what that meant for them, as well as all the inventions. Would you be open to doing a whole episode on just China and then from there going to Rome after that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's do that. Let's talk about Greece.
Yeah, Greece is a very celebrated culture. A lot of movies are made about like Alexander the Great conquering, or like the movie 300, you've heard of that, right? Celebrating the Battle of Thermopylae, where the Greeks are withstanding the Persian advance, right, under King Xerxes. So there's a warrior tradition in Greece. There's a literature tradition in Greece, right? Homer is one of the most famous ancient writers. He wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, two epic stories that have been retold many times in many ways. There's a political tradition with democracy. There's a philosophical tradition. I mean, we could go any direction. What do you want to know about Greece?
What are they known for? Like early on, what did they establish?
I mean, I gotta get into philosophy a little bit then. Sorry. So I know your guy, Aristotle, right? He wasn't the first, he wasn't the last, but he was almost certainly the most important thinker, right? And he's not to be studied in isolation because he was trained by Plato, who was trained by Socrates, right? And Aristotle himself trained Alexander the Great. But he solidifies and establishes logic. It's not that people never used logic before that, but he's the one that first defined it. Mm-hmm. And that is, people take it for granted, but that is what allows for knowledge to be possible. Was Aristotle defining logic, saying here are the laws of logic, and then here are the implications of that.
I love a story. I love Aristotle. Like, give me an example. He's walking around and he's showing up at X place and he's talking about X thing.
It's funny you should say it like that, because he was walking around and he stumbled on a rock, and that rock was called logic. He stumbled on logic. No, but he was known to be a peripatetic teacher in his lyceum. That was his school. Peripatetic means a moving teacher, someone who walked around while they taught, right? And he loved to read books. Do you like books?
Well, I love to walk around and talk.
Okay.
So you had me there. I'm kind of mesmerized by that alone.
Okay.
And then I love books.
Okay. But back then, being into books wasn't universally accepted as like, oh, that person is so studious, they're so smart. Because his teacher, Plato, thought Aristotle was a little too bookish. Mm-hmm. Too bookish. That's what he said. He's like, the real world, like, look up. Plato wrote books, right? So they were written to be read. Mm-hmm. But I think even more so, they were written to be read aloud, mm-hmm. right? It wasn't like an activity that you did privately, right? That's true. In fact, it was hundreds of years later that that became a fad to just like for monks to like read God's word on their own as a spiritual discipline. It was always, before that, it was always meant to be read aloud. I think Augustine was one of the first ones to, it was said of him that he would read scripture silently. And that was so weird. They were like, why isn't your mouth moving while you're reading that? Like, you're supposed to read it out loud. Like, no one read silently, you know. Anyway, so yeah, Aristotle walked around while he taught. He had his own school. Plato had his own school called the Academy. That's where we get the word academics, right? His academy, in fact, when Plato picked his successor to take over the Academy, he did not pick Aristotle, and that hurt little Aristotle's feelings. That's why he started his own school. But they also had a lot of disagreements, like philosophical disagreements.
What did you need to start your own school? Like,
you needed for sure. In fact, Plato's academy was built on an olive grove that was given to him by a man with that same name, like Academius or something like that. So that's where the name comes from. Is the man who gave him the land.
What gave him the qualifications to do what he did? Why did they give him that land? Did he believe
I think
in him?
if you're reputable as a scholar. Plato was the number one student of Socrates, and Socrates was definitely well known. He definitely had enemies. That's what led to his ultimate, conviction and sentencing him to death. But I think you gotta it's not too dissimilar to today. You gotta know people. You can't just start a school. Aristotle was the man. Established logic, established the laws of causality, implications of that being an uncaused cause to start the universe. Because remember, the ancient Greeks were trying to figure out what is behind everything, what's behind reality, what's started all this, what is all this, what is reality? Those were the questions they asked. Plato thought he had a good answer. Aristotle didn't like Plato's answer. He had his own answer. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little.
You're having fun.
What do you want to know about?
We're going to talk about China next time. I think they're fascinating. India, we talked a little bit about why they do so well. Their land is thriving. Summarize the ancient civilization.
Ancient civilizations are defined by their writing. That's how we know about them. There is an arbitrary end date to that, and that is when Rome fell. Because when Rome fell, that was the last great civilization that fell. And Europe was divided into different cultures and different people groups from the barbarian invasions. And that's what led to all the groups today, the Spanish and the Portuguese and the French and the Germans. Like those all came from invaders of the Romans, right? Whether you look at them positively or negatively, they had migrated and moved in. So that was a shift in time. So that's ancient times when people started to write for thousands of years until the last great civilization fell. There were others that would come along, of course, in the Middle Ages. The Mongols, Spain had a worldwide empire, so did the British. China's cool because it's not just like ancient times and then they stop. Like China continues, you can talk about China through the Middle Ages too.
What?
Say something.
Thank you so much, guys, for watching Greg and I talk about ancient history.
So I commend you because this is the one subject that you find most boring. I'm trying to make it fun for you. Let's talk about the Roman Empire for the next hour.
Here's the deal, Greg. Here's the deal. When I commit to learning about history, I will commit to learning about history. Thanks for being very engaging. This is like an overview because we're going to go down the timeline and there'll be things that we talk about a little bit more at depth.
And if you want to learn more, there is probably a Disney movie or some cartoon for each of these civilizations for you to learn more about. Watch The Prince of Egypt.
This was fun.
Thanks, Natty.
Thanks, Greg. I'll see you later.
Love you.
Love you too. Thanks you guys for watching.
And topical.
Hold on. We Hi, and welcome back to the Natalie Noyes podcast. No. No.
You're not welcome.
Let's try again. Okay, ready?